Hello, everybody. Welcome, one and all. It is time for something completely new to us. We are doing an online book launch party with our dear friend and an amazing author, an amazing chef as well, David Ruggerio. Yay!
How are you, Desiree?
I am good. How are you feeling?
Thank you so much for putting together this one-of-a-kind event. You know, it really is. I have never heard of nothing like this before. I'm so excited, and I just realized it's about my book. Oh my God!
It just dawned on you.
I just thought I was a guest here. Oh, Madonna me! Oh, what a wonderful thing!
You are a guest and you are the guest of honor. So thank you for writing this amazing book. It is called Say Goodbye and Goodnight. And we've got a lot of stuff going on. So let me kind of give you and everybody else a rundown of what we're doing. So yeah, we're doing this. It's a party. It's an hour long. In just a little bit, we're going to bring in two amazing actors. Now, the real names are Beck and Arnie, but they are playing Gia and Anthony, characters from the book. And as well, we're going to have a conversation with you in a little while. We're going to talk to you about the craft of writing and what you did for inspiration, how you pulled it all together. And we're just going to have this wonderful conversation. Then toward the end, we're going to open it up for questions. So everybody that is watching now, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever you are, you can see those chat boxes there. So just ask your questions. We have the lovely Sadie standing by. She's moderating those chats. So she's going to collect those questions. So even if you're thinking of a question as we're talking or as we're going, just write it in there. She'll queue them up and we'll answer those towards the end. And the really cool thing at the very, very end, we're giving away a bookish prize, actually several bookish prizes. We have as the grand prize an autographed copy of Say Goodbye and Goodnight, as well as an autographed copy of your first book, A Wistful Tale of Gods, Men, and Monsters, and some delicious oils that you can drizzle over things like pasta and pizza. So we'll have you tell us a little bit more about that later on too. Plus, then we have 3 bonus prizes, which are 3 autographed books of Say Goodbye and Goodnight. Without further ado, David, why don't you kind of set the stage and tell everybody about the reading that they're about ready to listen to from our actors?
Yeah, I'll tell you quickly. It's this is a romance. It's a romance set in 1977 Brooklyn. Okay, and this young Anthony is a young Italian-American prize fighter who sets his eyes on this beautiful girl, Gia. They meet in a disco, and this is really like the first time they're gonna go outside the disco. They go into a beach. Everybody knows Coney Island. Well, this is a part of Coney Island, the beach of Coney Island. And Coney Island is not only for hot dogs, it's also for loving. So without further ado, Desiree, go ahead and do your stuff.
All right. We're going to step away, and coming onto the stage are Anthony and Gia.
All right. We start. Sure, there were plenty of beautiful girls laid out in baking, but there was something different about my girl. She wasn't just flawless in her structure. Her skin was like silk over glass, and she radiated an intelligent beauty from within that rendered her irresistible to both genders. Men desired her, and women courted her friendship. When people got to know her, they discovered her greatest attribute. She was all about modesty, making things simple, helping those around her to unknot and be content with what they had. Perhaps that is why she glowed so. It was her inner beauty that lit her eyes and softened her image. When she smiled and laughed, you couldn't help but smile along with her. To be in her company was to feel you had been warmed in summer rays regardless of the season. I sprayed my enormous Bronx Bombers beach blanket out and switched on the boombox as the two of us snuggled together. My touch was tender and careful. Her lips were soft and inviting. Everything was perfect. The sweet falsetto melody of Nights on Broadway was drowning out the sounds of the ocean while creating a dramatic backdrop for our seaside love affair. Sure, I had experienced teenage crushes before, but now I realized what passion meant. As we kissed, her arms wrapped around me, and she rolled on top. She raised her head momentarily and laughed.
And you make me so happy.
Gia, you do not understand how happy you make me. She then became eerily quiet. She stripped me down to the core with her gaze.
Anthony, is it too early for me to tell you I love you?
I was speechless. My heart was racing, and my stomach was jittery. She waited anxiously for my reply. Gia, in love? I tried to regain some semblance of composure. Yes, wait. No, it's not too early. The truth is, I'm deeply in love with you. The dazzling smile returned. She playfully rolled me over again as we embraced. The rest of my world became a slight blur, vanished into the far recesses of our minds. The only thing that mattered was touching, kissing, and caressing her. I would cherish and guard these moments till the day I died. I knew she was special the moment I laid eyes on her, but this was beyond my wildest dreams. I was intoxicated by her. Off in the distance, as the sun began to set over Staten Island, we both raised our heads from our lengthy embrace to find most of the beach abandoned us.
And guess what? We're all alone.
Except for those seagulls staring us over there. As I laid, she rested her head on my shoulder, my chest.
And I love to watch you fight, but I fear for you. I'm so afraid someone will hurt you, baby.
Don't worry, I'm going to be champion of the world. I then witnessed her expression or lack of it. She would not feed my ego by cheering me on. Gia wasn't in love with chest pounding and self-admiration.
And I know you will, but I don't want anyone hurting you.
When she uttered the word hurt, my mind ridiculously shifted to Louis. I couldn't stop myself. Gia, can I ask you something? She nodded. How serious was her relationship with Louis? She must have expected this question at some point, but not minutes after professing her love to a person she was only dating for a few moments.
No, it was not serious. I liked him from the beginning, but then he showed his true self, and that's when I ended it.
In a blatant display of adolescent insecurity, I took an errant step and slipped off the cliff. Did you sleep with him? Her face soured.
How could you ask me that question?
She jumped up. Her mood became severe.
Anthony, can you please take me home?
How damn immature. She just professed her love, and my childish strengths of jealousy spoiled everything. Gia, please come back. Let's not end this afternoon like this. She continued to look away. Please, I'm so sorry. It was so stupid of me to ask such a stupid question. Gia, you're my everything. She began to soften. Gia, I'm deeply in love with you. It was just idiotic jealousy. She knelt on the edge of the towel.
And you have nothing to be jealous of. You are all I think about day and night. I'm in love with you.
Woo!
That was terrific, you two. Very terrific. Really great. Really
Fantastic.
terrific. Loved
So,
it.
David, how does it feel watching and hearing actors actually play out the characters from your book?
It's really special. I mean, you two guys really were really great, and it really makes my heart. I like tingle when I listen to you two guys do it. I mean, I really my heartfelt thanks for the work you did on this. They're really great.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. You can unmute your mics. There you go. Yeah, you can.
Thank you, David. I
didn't want to
enjoyed
interrupt.
reading it. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, it was. It felt so good just reading the lines and thinking you're back then in the 70s, and you're in Staten Island. Although at first I got a Staten Island. That's Staten, not Staten. Anyway.
Well,
And I wanted just 1 second, Desiree, for
Yeah.
everybody out there that didn't understand, because for me, the Bronx bomber blanket, there's got to be like a glossary for what things mean. That's the New York Yankees there, the New York Yankees. So somebody might have says the Bronx bomber, what? What was that? The New York Yankees.
That was quite a tongue twister, too. It's a lot of alliteration.
I had to practice it a few times. I'm not going to lie.
David just wanted to test us.
Yes. I hope we passed.
You guys knocked it out of the ballpark.
Yes.
Thanks. We
Thank you.
appreciate you
Fabulous job.
letting us be a part of the creation here.
Thank
So
you.
it's really
We feel
exciting.
honored.
The
I'm not going to
pleasure's
lie.
all mine.
We really feel honored to be in part of this. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much. Pleasure's all mine. Really.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later, okay? Thank you so much. You guys were magnificent. Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you later.
Oh, my. Yeah, that had to just feel so cool. Like having your
yeah.
words come to life like that. It's just the best.
It's kind of shocking. I said, as they were talking, I says, I really wrote that? Oh, my God. No, it really was nice. Really special. That was a special thing you did, Desiree. Very special.
Oh, yeah. Well, the interesting thing, too, is we were chatting a little bit before we started, and Arnie, who plays Anthony, being a guy, was talking about as he was reading the book and obviously reading his lines and rehearsing, how it felt like you really captured the inner workings of a guy, of a teenage guy. So why don't you talk a little bit about the character and developing that character and tell us a little bit more about Anthony?
Well, it's the book itself is based in 1977 Brooklyn. I picked 1977 because that particular year, New York, not just Brooklyn, but New York City was, if you look at the annals of the history of that city, it was one of the most tumultuous years. You had the infamous Blackout of 1977. You had disco, which Brooklyn, of course, was the center of the universe for disco. You had Saturday Night Fever, and the story itself, Anthony Marino, young Italian American up and coming fighter, and he hangs out in this disco. And a lot of the things that I talk about in this book, these are real places. And there's a few real people in it. The disco that he hangs out in is a disco on 86th Street. Now, for no one who knows Brooklyn, 86th Street is the Broadway of Brooklyn, and it cuts through Brooklyn. And this disco is called, believe it or not, really was called Romeo and Juliet's. And this is where Anthony hangs out. It's upstairs above a bank, and it's really was a special place because I hung out there, so I know I could tell you firsthand.
Well, and that's the thing too. I'm going to dig into that a little bit because let's face it, a lot of Anthony is a lot of you back then, right?
It is. I mean, I was a fighter too, and I had a few romances in my time, and so he's hanging out in his disco, and he sets his eyes on this young girl, Gia, and she's just pure beauty. And inside and outside, that's the important thing about this girl, this character that I talk about, is that her beauty is not just external. She's a beautiful young girl, and he is a guy that's full of bravado and confidence, is stripped naked by this girl. He's nervous wreck. He doesn't know how to approach her and so forth. And the book is really about him going after her, his chase after her. Now, I want you to realize something, that around this romance, and it's a beautiful romance that a lot of people can recognize. This is a great book. This summer, with all the baloney going on, COVID and everything else, this is a great book. I take you back to a glorious time, a time that's, whether you live in Texas or you live in Colorado, as those two young people do, or California like you, Desiree, you can appreciate this book. It's not a Brooklyn, it's not a New York commercial. And
right.
Anyway, these two young people, they're in love and they're chasing each other. But within Brooklyn in 1977, there was darkness that hovered around in each corner.
Yeah, let's get into that because you're bringing up a really good point. And the thing that I love about this book is it is a summer read. Usually romance novels are good summer beach reads. And we are living right now in such a weird time. It just feels like this has never been so chaotic. Like you said, COVID and people protesting, an upcoming election. And I feel like there's a lot of your book just naturally is a juxtaposition against that in 1977 in Brooklyn, because you mentioned there was things happening that were kind of crazy. The
Yes.
Blackout, the Son of Sam. And let's face it, there might be some people that are just a little bit younger than us that might not know who the Son of Sam is or have ever really heard about the Great Blackout. Do you want to just, describe those things a little bit more in detail so people really understand the setting?
Well, we'll start with the Blackout. The Blackout, which I do describe about in the book, began in the beginning. It was the first week in July, and it was during the middle of 8 days of 100+ degree temperature. And for most of us in Brooklyn, we did not have air conditioners back then. We suffered, and that's the truth. And during that time, there was looting and destruction of the neighborhoods that New York had never seen. I can't speak for other parts of the country, but New York never saw that type of looting. Total neighborhoods were totally burned down. Businesses put out forever. Lives were changed. There was a lot of anger back then. There's a lot of similarities to today, and that anger on those nights. It was 2 nights and 3 days of this blackout that people just went nuts. Their anger boiled over, and they felt like they were trapped. And like I said, it's part of the book. It's part of me. It's part of all people that grew up in New York at that time. It's something that we'll never forget. And the other thing we'll never forget that is deep in New York history, and it's in U.S. history too, is there was a gentleman, and he covertly went around. And during those days, in those 1977, when we met the young girl or the girl met the guy, we hung out in the car in the corner on a dark street, and we kissed each other, and the romances started and so forth. Well, this creep, and I call him a creep, would sneak around in the dark, and he used a 44 caliber pistol, which is a cannon, and he murdered these young couples that were romancing, snuck up on them and shot and killed them. And it caused, he actually was picking on blonde girls. And during that, sorry, Desiree, but during those days, this is the God's honest truth, mothers were buying dark wigs for their daughters. It was such a horror because this went on for more than a year. And what this guy did was, I don't remember the total amount of people he killed. He killed quite a few people. And he went from being called the 44 caliber killer. His name transformed. And I'll tell you why it transformed. He started writing to a very famous newspaper columnist named Jimmy Breslin. Real person, Jimmy. And a legendary columnist. And the Son of Sam, actually was the 44 caliber killer at the time, started writing letters to Jimmy Breslin, and he named himself then the Son of Sam. And it went on from there that he started challenging the New York City Police Department that they could never catch him. He offered to buy them all sneakers. He said, "You'll be running all night after me." And on one of the later letters, he didn't originally, it started in the Bronx, then it went to Queens. And us in Brooklyn said, he don't have the nerve to come to Brooklyn, because Brooklyn, we all thought we were tough guys.
Yeah.
And one night he went, and near the Verrazano Bridge on a Friday night, he gunned down 2 very beautiful young people. And he wrote a letter the next day to Jimmy Breslin, just like laughing about it. And he signed it, "Say goodbye and good night." And that is where the title of my book comes from, that true letter to Jimmy Breslin. And it was a summer never to forget for many reasons. A lot of good reasons, and obviously some pretty evil reasons. Now, no spoilers here. I'm not going to spoil the end of the book. But this is a race to the end between these 2 beautiful young people and the different evils, because there's more than just the Son of Sam in this book.
Mm-hmm.
There's organized crime, which unfortunately existed in New York and Brooklyn at those times. It wasn't a movie; it was true. And so it's kind of a sprint to the end. And they have to avoid these different demons and evils that lurk in the corners and darkness. And like I said, no spoiler, but the ending is pretty good. I mean,
It is. It
great,
is.
great way to lay on the beach, have a nice glass of wine, and enjoy young love again.
Yeah.
And that's what I really try to do, is celebrate young love.
Yeah, the book itself, it's quite an adventure. And bringing in some of those authentic, that realism, that grittiness, it feels hot. Like actually, when you're reading the book, it's almost like a visceral reaction where you can feel the heat and the grittiness of the city. So bravo for putting that together. Can you talk a little bit about your process? How do you write? Where do you write? Are you the person who sits out on the beach and writes? It looks like you're in your study there. Is that where you write? Are you in coffee shops? Tell us a little bit about your process.
I'm not an educated, formally educated person. I mean, I was a wise guy when I was a kid, and so I don't have that formal education. This actually, I like to say, is my study, but this is my basement, and I lock myself down here. I can't have any distractions, and I think and so forth. But this book was really a little bit easy for me, because as you've said, Desiree, there's a lot of me in this book. This was a labor of love, and there was a lot of parts of this book that were not easy to write, because it brings back memories of good and bad, not all bad, not all good, but the process. This was not, I have to say, so far, I wrote, as you had mentioned before, when we were talking about the prizes, A Wistful Tale of Gods, Men, and Monsters, which was my first book, which was a horror book. I'm a horror aficionado, so that wasn't hard. And this one wasn't too hard either. And I locked myself away, and I kind of transported myself back to Brooklyn in those days. I really kind of relived those days. And hopefully, I take this all by the hand, and I lead you back there to Brooklyn during those days, because it was a different time. And for all the young people out there that feel as though they need to go on a website to find a loved one, or or a romance, or they need to text the person sitting across the bar to communicate with them, throw the goddamn phone away, will you please? If you don't know what to do, this book is the instructions. Walk off behind and go schmooze with her. Buy her a drink. What is this with the telephone all the time? Forget about it. For all of you young people, and I really, no joking, all joking aside now. I got my 2 grandchildren. I think about this. There was something that was beautiful about what we did back in the day, the way we interacted with each other. And I feel bad for the young people that don't have that. And I can't say it's their choice. Society as a whole has kind of disarmed them and given them this electronics to do their bidding. And that process is.
I absolutely agree. And you're talking a little bit about family. So let's delve into that. One of the things that you had mentioned to me a while back was when you were younger yourself, sitting around the kitchen table with your family, aunts, uncles, your parents, everybody, cousins, because you had this wonderful Italian family and that's what you did. And so you talk about not necessarily being formally educated as a writer, but you definitely were educated as a storyteller because of those great stories that you heard around the table, right?
Well, I'm glad you say that, because that's what I say to people. I'm not a writer. I'm a storyteller. And I grew up Italian American. I'm first generation Italian. And I know in Brooklyn, not only Brooklyn, New York, back in the day, there were immigrant groups, not just Italians. There were Jewish people on the Lower East Side. There were Irish people. There were all immigrants. And there was something about the immigrants' way of around the table, around their food, around their cuisine, them telling these stories about different stories. Some of them, the troubles they went through and so forth. But it's the way that they told these stories. There was really was an art. Some of these people, the way they could tell a story. I saw uncles of mine and so forth. And I had one uncle they called Jimmy the Grouch. He wasn't too grouchy, but he used to sit around and he could call. Sounds like a joke, right? But it wasn't.
Right.
He could sit around and hold an audience of 40 people, telling the stories. And sometimes, and my wife always complains about this. She says, "My God, you're telling that story again. I can't hear it no more." But even if he told it again, new audience, same story. He held the thing, and that's the way. A lot of our history was passed on that way. And I sound like I come from the 1800s, but I don't. I mean, back then in the 60s and 70s, the Italians coming over, and like I said, other ethnic groups, that's the way we said it. But there was a beauty to it because it wasn't just the stories. It was cooking that came along with it. The hen, here it comes on Sunday. In Brooklyn, we used to call it tomato sauce gravy. And we had all the meatballs and the pork and everything in the sauce. That took, my grandmother cooked in a pot. It looked so big. It looked like in Brooklyn, we had the Kosciuszko pool. It was a public pool that had 500 people. My grandmother's pot looked like the Kosciuszko pool when she cooked. And she would simmer that sauce for hours and hours and hours. I'd wake up in the morning as a kid and smell that.
Ooh, that sounds delicious.
The beauty of it is, and it comes true in the book, because I talk about this type of cooking and this type of family book, that even if we didn't have a lot of money or we didn't have anything fancy, we had each other. We had that cuisine. We had that culture. And that culture is what carried us through everything. And that is really, when you read the book, that is the heart of that book. And I speak from the Italian Americans, it is that culture that carried this young Anthony and this young Gia together, and their families. I described their families and so forth. So, not to get too long-winded, because everybody out there saying, when is he going to stop talking? But anyway, that's the gist of the book.
And let's talk a little bit about that too, because I know you obviously have shifted. You made this wonderful transition in life where you said, I want to be a writer. But before that, you were known as a super chef. You've had television shows. Yeah. You've been to France. You've worked at some of the best eateries in New York City. Can you talk a little bit about as well? Because as you were growing up, your grandmother, right, was a big influence on the cooking side of David Ruggerio.
I realized, by the time I was 9 years old, I'd been arrested a half a dozen times. I was a street kid. I was a tough kid. My mother died when I was 5, and my father was jailed before I was born. And I really was, it was not an easy life. Not complaining, but I realized when I was graduating high school, I was a thug in the street. And that's not the way I wanted my life to go. I needed something. And I got to tell you, I was one of the luckiest people in the world, because I found something that I had a crazy passion for. And I see people that go to work every day and they're miserable going to work. I feel so bad for them. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to find the cooking, to find the kitchen. And so I decided I was going to be a chef. And I bought back copies of a magazine called Gourmet Magazine. And there was a writer in there named Jay Jacobs. And Jay Jacobs every month used to say to you, I'm going to tell you the best restaurants in New York or here or there. But in New York, he said back then that Le Caravelle was one of the 2 or 3 best restaurants in the United States, not only New York, the United States. That's it. I'm going with Caravelle. The fact that I never cooked in a restaurant before mattered nothing to me. I went there, no baloney. I went there 12 times. 12 times they told me to get the hell out of there. oh my God, what am I going to do here? But I'm not giving up. I just, from being in Brooklyn, like the way I did, we never gave up. We never took no for an answer. On the 13th time, the poor chef had had a heart attack 2 days before. I walked in, the sous chef was there. He's okay, pal. You start on Monday. 45 guys, all French. Nobody spoke English, and neither did I. English, and I didn't speak. Oh my God! I ran to a bookstore called B. Dalton. I bought all the French cookbooks I could find, and did nothing for me. First 9-10 months, they beat the living baloney out of me. I was told I was no good, and this I was because I wasn't French. I never worked in France, and at the end of 9 months, I said, "Look, if I'm no good. I can't make myself French. Okay, I can't hatch an egg. So how about this? You send me to France." The chef says, "Okay. You come and talk to me tomorrow." The next day, he came to me. He says, "Okay, on Monday, just like this. Monday, you're leaving. You're going to Nice." Nice where? Nice, France. Monday morning, Monday afternoon, no joke. I landed in Nice, and I went to work at the Hotel Negresco at a restaurant called Le Chanticleer with the chef that had just been named by a very famous magazine in France called the Gomio. He named the best young chef in France. His name was Jacques Maximin. I spent 14 months with Maximin, and he opened my eyes to what cuisine could truly be. Not only that, he opened my eyes to what a man was. I thought I was a man. I wasn't a man. He opened my eyes. And at the end of those 14 months, I then
How did he do that? How did he open your eyes to being a man?
Yeah, I'll tell you one quick way. In France, in the kitchens, they don't wear shoes. They wear, remember in Holland, those kids ran around with wooden clogs.
Sure.
He
Yeah.
kicked me every day in the behind with those clogs. God damn fast I woke up. No, I mean it was baptism by fire. And at the end of that 14 months, he sent me to another restaurant in the foothills, just on the foothills of the Pyrenees Mountains in the southwest of France. There is a restaurant. It's called, I'm not even going to tell you the name. It's so long you're not even going to remember it. But there was this little chef, big nose. He was a wizard. He was the greatest chef of the 20th century. And I kid you not. His name was Michel Girard, and his cooking changed the world. He called his cooking Nouvelle Cuisine, and that was like a tidal wave that swept across the world. It changed cooking in Japan, in everywhere, all over Europe, in the United States, and so forth. And the time I spent with that man, he taught me what cooking. Where Maximin taught me what it was to be a man, Girard taught me what it was to be a chef. He opened my eyes to what cuisine, the potential for what cuisine could be, and simplicity in product, and so forth. And things don't have to be overcomplicated. And sometimes some of the dishes were only 2 or 3 ingredients, but they were so great, the dishes, that they were spoken about all over the world. Can you imagine putting 2 or 3 ingredients together? Yeah. And all over the world they talk about it. I come back to La Caravelle, and when I was 25 years old, they made me the executive chef. I don't think they really had a lot of confidence in me. I think they threw a whole, because it was tough then in those days. They were an old style French restaurant. I think they were throwing a Hail Mary pass, and I got rave reviews. And one of the customers of La Caravelle, his name was a designer named Pierre Cardin. And Pierre had opened a restaurant on Madison Avenue in New York called Maxime's. And it was a huge place. And when he opened it, he spent millions and millions of dollars. Disaster. He brought a parade of chefs over from France, one worse than the other. Not that they were worse than the other, but the New York press didn't want them. And he offered me a job. I took the job, and I got rave reviews again. God really blessed me. Mm-hmm. And I went on from there. I started owning restaurants. I became a partner with Pierre Cardin. And then one day, Robert Mondavi was putting together this series called America's Rising Star Chef, and they were looking for 13 really talented young American chefs. And they picked me, and I met a wonderful man. His name was Jim Louts. Was he was the director of that series. And then me and him put together my first PBS series called Little Italy, and Jim was a really great wizard with what he did.
Yeah.
And I wrote books. I wrote the Little Italy cookbook. I wrote another book, and then all of a sudden, Food Network came knocking at the door, and they gave me a license to act like a lunatic. Because not only was I and then you could see some of these crazy segments on my YouTube channel, but not only does every segment had a little piece in the studio, but every segment had me going running around in wherever and doing whatever I wanted. And boy, would I act like a nut. And
I don't believe that for a second. No way, really?
I'm being very reserved here. Don't make fun of me. What are you doing? But I had a lot of fun with that, and my career really was, I God blessed me because it just was one success after another, and I'm not bragging, and then things happened and so forth, and it wasn't all nicety.
Right. Well, underneath it all, you are a fighter. And I think that's the metaphor that really just resonates because you didn't give up. You had that tenacity, just like Anthony in your book. You stuck with it. You kept going. You went in there not 11 times, not 12 times, 13th time until you got what you wanted. And I think that speaks to your spirit and your tenacity. And now as you've transitioned to being a writer, it speaks to that as well because you're breaking expectations. Even your family, friends probably said, why are you writing now? Why are you doing that, right?
Nobody in my family really takes it serious yet. They all think I'm a lunatic. And they think that I'm going to wake up one morning and realize I'm not supposed to do this. But the fact of the matter is, I've been lucky enough to find a second passion in my life. I mean, not many people find one passion. I found a second passion. And I really love it. And I'm having fun doing it. And I really put my heart and soul in it. So,
Yes, you do.
I really do. I hope it shows. To the people who haven't read anything yet, I hope it shows that I really put my heart and soul in it. I don't take it lightly.
Absolutely. And we're going to get to some questions in a little bit. I just want to remind everybody to go ahead. You can give us questions. Sadie is standing by. She'll grab the questions and put them up so that I can read them to David. We'll start doing that in about 7-8 minutes or so. And then at the very end, if you haven't entered yet, we're giving away some bookish goodies. We're giving away 2 copies of or a copy of each book, Wistful Tales, as well as this book, Say Goodbye and Goodnight, that are both autographed, as well as some flavored oils. Can you tell everybody really quick about those? What makes those so special?
I got Calabrian chilies, tiny little Calabrian chilies, so small. You say, they're so cute. They'll bite you. They bite. Be careful. I make a wonderful oil with them with garlic and rosemary. The rosemary and the garlic is from my garden, and that oil is just terrific. Drizzle it on pizza, a little bit. If you like spiciness on it, or your grilled meat or fish, drizzle a little bit right at the end. Boy, I tell you, it gives a nice little savory bite to it. And it's really something special. I make it in my kitchen. There's no baloney.
It sounds delicious. It sounds just magnificent. So yeah, everybody make sure you're entering. We'll announce the winners of that. As well, we're giving away 3 bonus prizes, which are signed copies of the book, Say Goodbye and Goodnight. And now we're mentioning A Wistful Tale of Gods, Men, and Monsters, which you hit #1 in the horror category on Amazon when that first came out late last year. Congratulations for that. Why don't you tell everybody about that really quick so they know what to expect with that book?
That's a book I love. I'm a horror aficionado, and I'm not these new horror with gory and zombies. I don't do that. This is more on a classic vein. It's about an upstate New York town that's haunted, and it's I get a little kid that then his little girl friend that they're the ones that fight the monsters and so forth. It's the kind of book that I really foresee people pick up every Halloween and read to their children. It's really not gory, so you can read it to your children, your grandchildren. But and it's all centered around Halloween, and it's got a cemetery. It's got everything you were expecting: cemetery, haunted house. Forget about it. It's all there. But really, really good. And I mean, I was very lucky. I got some very nice reviews about it, and the book did really well. And so I think you'll enjoy it. I think it's something that you really like, and especially if you're like a Frankenstein, the old 1931 Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff. Ooh, you're gonna love this one.
Yeah, and it's great for kids. It's appropriate for not real little ones. You might scare them, but it feels like a family read in a lot of ways.
Yes. You know what? It's a fun scare. There are bad scares. This is a fun scare. It's the kind of scare that you really welcome and enjoy. It's an enjoyable scare. So turn the lights off. Get that same glass of wine that you were gonna have on the beach, and hot chocolate for the kiddies, and scare your pants off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, nowadays too, if people are camping, especially if you want to give yourself a little social distancing, there's still things that we can do outside, right? We can still go camping or sit around the campfire with friends and sharing those scary stories, whether it's now in the summer or in the fall when it's Halloween time. Either way, it works out just fine.
A lot of the stuff that we used to do years ago that people abandoned, there's a lot, not everything, but some of that stuff is safe. Like you said, at the campfire and so forth, it's safe, keep your distance a little bit. But what great fun to sit around a campfire and read a scary book and drink hot chocolate. And I'm not too old. I love hot chocolate. Forget about good hot chocolate. Give me the little marshmallows, and I'm content here. Forget about it. I don't need the fancy stuff. Little marshmallows, the little ones. And the campfire is a lot of fun.
Exactly. Okay, so once again, make sure you're asking questions. We're going to start doing that in just a few minutes. And why don't you right now, David, just let people know if they're curious to where they can find you on social media, your website, where they can find the book, that kind of stuff, so that people know how to follow you.
Facebook, everything, Twitter, Instagram, and also I have 2 sites of my own. If you're into the cooking, davidruggerio.com. If you like to cook, I try to post recipes every week. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But that's where you find all the cooking stuff is on davidruggerio.com. And then for the literary, go to ruggerioBooks.com and give you all the information, upcoming appearances, once the bookstores reopen and stuff like that. But all literary, ruggerioBooks.com, and then like all the other stuff, the Instagram, David.Ruggerio, and Twitter and Facebook, and who knows, I lost track of everything. There's too many things now with the social, but I'm on them all. Don't worry about it. You'll find me somewhere.
You're everywhere. Absolutely. All right, are you ready for some questions? We can have some questions from...
Sure.
All right. Lisa asks, how do you go from writing a horror novel to a love story? How do you make that transition?
Sometimes romances can turn into horrors. I hate to tell you that, but I write what I love, and I love a horror. I do, but I love that what I wrote about. I don't think I could write another book like Say Goodbye and Goodnight. I don't think I have another one in me. It was not easy to write some of it. Some of the parts of it were too close to home. And I don't think there's another one in me like that. Horror, yes, but not that. So take advantage. You're not going to get another one.
All right. We have Mary Jo. She's got a great question. Have you considered writing an adult book combining horror and food?
Wow. I think you got something there.
That's a good idea, isn't it?
I'm just going this way. Wait, where's my finger? I think you got something there. Sometimes the kitchen would be some horror, I tell you. I was the funny thing. Someone posted a cartoon on my Facebook page. You guys could go look. One is a beautiful little Labrador Retriever with his tail wagging and this, and next to him is the werewolf from Werewolf in London, growling with his teeth out and so forth. And he said, "I heard your reputation was." The Labrador was when you would talk to customers, but in the kitchen you were like the werewolf, and that was the guys. I hate them. It's not something I'm proud of, but I was tough in the kitchen. I was very, very tough. At Maxime's, I had 125 in the kitchen, so there was no room for chit chat, and so yeah, maybe you got.
Yeah, I can see the werewolf resemblance there, just a little bit. Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, here's a question from somebody from New Jersey. Sophie from New Jersey wants to know about the real places and the settings that you had there. So I know you mentioned the disco. Were there any other real places that you pulled in as the settings and the scenes in Say Goodbye and Goodnight?
Yes, there is an avenue in Brooklyn, in Bensonhurst, called 18th Avenue. And on 18th Avenue, there's the biggest feast, I believe so, the biggest Italian feast in America. It's the Sicilian feast of Santa Rosalia. So in the book, I talk about 18th Avenue, and I talk about a real pastry shop that unfortunately is no longer there. There was a pastry shop there where it was, but it was called Alba's Pastry Shop. And I even talk about a dear friend of mine. I don't know if he's watching now. His name was Luigi De Rosa. He was the baker there, one of the finest Italian bakers you ever met. So those places like that, the disco and so forth, I talk about. And one other funny thing, I'll tell you. The gym in the bar that he fights in is an upstairs gym, and his trainer's name is Izzy. Well, I trained in a place on Church Avenue in Brooklyn called Izzy Zerling's Youth Center. Can't make that one up.
Right.
My trainer's name was Izzy Zerling. Izzy had fought 600 pro fights during the Depression. He fought every week to eat. He was my trainer and my manager. And that's why I'm so screwed up today, because Izzy was a one of a kind. He was a character, the character of characters. And I based the Izzy character in there, and the gym in there, although I don't say it's on Church Avenue, that's another true place, real place, is the youth center.
That's amazing.
In Brooklyn, we don't say youth. We say youth.
Youth. All right. I think this is from Argia, our actress back. She's also asking a question. What books, movie, art inspired you in your writing of your book? Where'd you get your inspiration from? Any sources?
I love Stephen King, as everybody. I mean, most people like they love Stephen King. But believe it or not, I find it hard to read. I hate to say this because I write fiction. I read fiction, but I really like nonfiction. Sometimes nonfiction can't come close. Fiction can't come as crazy as nonfiction. There are some nonfiction books out there. They say, is this for real? And I love history and so forth. And so that's really, but as far as fiction, I love Stephen King and all the different horror writers. I have the original, no baloney. I have the original copy of Dracula.
Ooh, wow. Bram Stoker?
Yeah, I won't even open it. I bought a used copy on Amazon. I read that one. But Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and so forth, I really enjoy, and they're not what I think the average reader who've never read them before would think, especially Mary Shelley, as a quote unquote classic horror book. It's really not. And the movie really did it a justice and an injustice because it gave people an odd view of what the book was about. It's not really about that. So I hope I answer. Sometimes I go on these crazy tangents.
Oh, that's perfect. No, I'm a big Mary Shelley fan. Really, she wrote the first science fiction book. That was the first. She started the genre.
As a teen. She did it as a teen. You
Yeah.
read that book, and it's mind-boggling that
Yeah.
she wrote this as at her age, and she came up with some of this stuff at her age.
Yeah.
Claire, I think that anybody that really say they want to read horror, you start with those two books, and then you go from there.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to do the contest in just a little bit. We have in the background here, we have Dave, not David, but Dave, our tech guy. He's going to be pulling those names in just a few minutes. So if you haven't entered yet, please make sure you do that. If you're like, oh my God, where do I go to enter? It's on the Books That Make You website. Just go to up in the corner where it says win, and you can enter, lots of different times too. It give you lots of opportunities to win. So make sure that you do that, because we're going to be drawing in just a little bit. But first, I have some more questions, and you can keep the questions coming too. We still got about 6-7 minutes for questions. Now, here's one. We have somebody asking about your cookbooks, because you have done several cookbooks already as well, right? Do you want to just mention those really quick and tell us about those?
I wrote first book I wrote was when I was approached to write a cookbook when I was still working in French kitchens, because that's really what I did. I worked in French kitchens, and I said the last thing in the world I want to do is write a French cookbook, because nobody in their right mind is going to cook from it. French cookbooks by chefs usually end up being an ego trip, and I didn't want to sell 5,000 copies. So our first book I wrote about, it's called Little Italy, and it's the people, the characters that make Little Italy in America, the different regions they come from, and the home style cooking of the Italians and the Italian Americans. And it really did well. It really did well. So my same publisher at the time, Workman Publishing, said to me, it was actually Artisan, a division of Workman, said to me, we'll write the next one. So the next book I did was I went to my mother's house in Naples and my father's house in Sicily. And I wrote about the similarities and the differences, because Naples is called the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, because at one time Naples had conquered Sicily. And there were tremendous similarities to the Neapolitan and Italian cooking. That book was called David Ruggerio's Italian Kitchen. And I even put little pieces about the dialect, the people. I have pictures of the characters in the different towns and so forth. I tell stories about the people and so forth. And it's, Neapolitan cooking is very colorful. The Neapolitan people are loud and colorful, and that's the way their cooking is. Sicilian people are brooding. It seems like the whole country is brooding and quiet. And that's the way the cooking of Sicily is. It's very subtle and so forth, but very strong flavors. So those are the two cookbooks. And I'm working on another cookbook, come out the end of next year. I call it A Tomato Grows in Brooklyn. And about all crazy stories, wacky stories, and recipes, Italian recipes from Brooklyn that you have never read about in a cookbook. These are the recipes, the down-home recipes that you have never seen before. One of a kind. They'll come down. Desiree will be telling you about that one sometime next year when that's coming.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Tomato Grows in Brooklyn.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we got some really good questions here. So Greg 2001 asks, what advice do you have for guys who write love scenes or romance?
First and foremost, don't curse. Not nice. I think that people that feel that they need to curse, they give too much away. There's something about saying less is saying more. And so I think that the other thing you have to do is you have to put your mind in the girl's mind. You can't only think about everything as a guy. You got to take care of it from the other side. And I credit this. You know who I credit this with? I was raised by my grandmother and my great-grandmother too. But my grandmother was a sweet, loving person, and she gave me that kind of mentality, the way. I can't say I think like a woman does, absolutely not. But she gave me a gentler side. I say that. And I say that with all my love and my heart for my grandmother. And so to answer your question, you have to try to put your mind in the woman's mind too. You can't just talk about it from a man's perspective.
And that leads to another question, too. We had another question from a woman who was asking basically that. What's the most difficult thing about writing characters from the opposite sex?
I think that saying things loving, I love you, and this and that, it's very easy. Very easy.
Getting that emotion to come out.
There's not much behind those words. But the subtle things about a woman, the way she moves, the way she talks. There's a whole section in the book that I talk about women and what certain things they do, I believe, mean. And not that I know everything, I certainly don't. But that was one part of the book that was a little difficult for me because I had to, what does that mean? I get my hand in here. What does that mean? What does this mean? Now, I'm being funny about it, but there are little subtleties about a woman that as a man you watch and you take in and you learn. Over time, you learn. You might be wrong. And that's what I write. It was not easy to write about, those subtleties.
Mm-hmm. And that leads us to, this is great. I love the way these questions kind of feed into each other. Bill from LA wants to know, did you use any inputs from friends and family while writing about the lead characters of your story? I think he means, did you have any inspiration or did you use real people, real friends and family when you were writing the lead characters?
Certainly all parts of my family are involved in this. Okay. But I'm going to say one thing. I don't really tell people often. The reason I got in, just bear with me when I tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I left the kitchen, I think Desiree knows this already. The reason I left the kitchens is because tomorrow, Father's Day, will be 6 years I lost my oldest son. I lost my oldest son to opioid addiction, and I could not any longer cook in the kitchen. I walked. I couldn't do it. It broke my heart, ripped my heart from me.
Yeah.
And it turned that hurt, that pain inside me is what made me begin to write. And although most of the character Anthony Marino is it's kind of like me, a lot of it is about my son. And even the nickname in the book for Anthony Marino, Ant, that's what we used to call my son, Ant. We never they used it. So of course, there were other people in my family that I took inspiration. But behind the scenes, it was my son. I mean, he was the inspiration, and it was that pain that got me to write. So, I'm being a little bit of a downer, but
we're gonna bring it back up. Well, I think that's the passion that comes through, and that's one of the things: the good, the bad, the experiences of our lives, our family, especially for you when you're pulling from your real experiences and your family and the things that you know, and you're pouring it out into your writing. That's part of the creative process. So that's what we all do as writers.
Yes.
Right?
It's not easy. When you start digging deep, it hurts, and it's not easy sometimes.
Let's go to Jennifer's question. Jennifer from Denver asks, what is your favorite part of this book?
The end, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's a spoiler, but the beginning. No, actually, there's a part of the book that I talk about the disco. I describe the disco. I bring you back to 77, and I describe to you the ritual of the young men and the young women getting ready to go out that night. And it's a ritual. And I go into depth about the whole ritual, the way they dress, the way this, that, and what there's meaning behind everything. And that I really enjoyed. It was one of my favorite parts of the book, and I think you'll enjoy it too. You know, like how you said before, you don't have to been living in Brooklyn. You don't have to even love disco. But there's a lot of rituals in this book that you can find meaning in regardless of where you are or what your favorite things are, and so forth. And that part, I think everybody will get a laugh out of. It's kind of funny. I think everybody get a chuckle out of that one.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more question, and I'm pinging Dave so I can get the winner so we can announce those in a few seconds here. I'm going to do that in just a minute. So there's so many great questions. I don't want to miss any of them. So let me go to one more. Let's see. There's so many of them. Okay, this is a good one. Do you hide any secrets in your books that only a few people will find? Are there any Easter eggs in there or any references that maybe a good friend or somebody will get?
There's a big one. There's a huge one.
Okay.
Do I got to tell the whole thing?
I don't know. It's up to you. I don't think we've ever gone into this question before, so this is interesting.
The name Gia Colombo is... Desiree knows I'm writing my memoir is written, and it's actually this past week we're working out a deal. At least everybody's gonna read it in the coming year. But the first girl I ever was engaged to, I was head over heels for. I don't use her real name in the memoir, but in reality, Gia Colombo is her real name. And there's a lot of story behind this that you're going to have to buy the memoir about. And there's a real intent. We don't have enough time here for me to tell the whole story, but it's a wild, that's her secret. That's Gia Colombo is her real name.
That is a great way to end this because I know you're dying to talk about this memoir. So you're just kind of hanging out this little matzo ball to tease everybody because I do know about that memoir, and I'm just, every time I think of it, I just get so excited because I know this memoir is just going to be amazing. So I can't wait personally, but that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to give anything away. All right, David, our tech Dave, has given us the winners of the prizes. So once again, we have 3 bonus prizes. Those are autographed copies of Say Goodbye and Goodnight. And those are going out to, I love these names. I love it because they're email addresses and a lot of times you're not quite sure what the actual name is. Edge Hellfire. Congratulations to Edge Hellfire, as well as, I don't know if I should say this, Data Entry Tard.
Oh my God.
I know, right? The things people have for email addresses. A Rayetta as well. So you 3 people, congratulations. You got the bonus prizes. And now, the ultimate winner of both books, autographed, A Wistful Tale, as well as Say Goodbye and Goodnight, and those amazing, delicious oils that you made. We have Jennifer 8. Congratulations, Jennifer 8. Yay!
And I'm happy to personalize all the books, whatever you want me to write. Let Desiree know. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. We will email all the winners, just in case you were like, is that my email address? Or we'll let everybody know, and we'll get your real name or the name that you would like David to sign the book to. Once again, David, thank you for doing this party, and thank you for being such an amazing author and sharing your stories with everybody.
And thank you, Desiree. This has been spectacular. You and the Dave behind you who put this all together electronically. I don't understand this stuff.
That guy.
Thank you both a million.
You bet, my friend. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this Books That Make You online book launch party with David Ruggerio and his amazing book, Say Goodbye and Goodnight. I'm going to just add our actors again so we can say thank you to them really quick. They're kind of like in the green room. They're backstage. They're still with us.
Much. Thank you so much. You guys are great.
Thank you for sharing your story, David. Thank you. It was great to hear.
My pleasure. My great pleasure. Thank you both. Thank you all, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. We're going to log off now. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Make sure you read the books. Bye.